Hello and welcome to another episode of How Are You Holding Up? A mental health podcast by the depressed, for the depressed. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lindsay.
And the first question I don't think I really need to ask is, Lindsay, how are you holding up?
In a lot of ways, I'm doing pretty well. In my personal life, I have a lot of positivity happening. But in a much larger sense, there's so much sadness and stress and enormous loss that is happening right now that it can be difficult. How are you holding up, Chris?
Very similarly. We, as I'm sure pretty much everybody in our audience knows, we are based out of Los Angeles. And there's been a few tragedies that have occurred in the last week. One, the shooting in Thousand Oaks. And two, the wildfires that are kind of rampaging throughout the entire Southern California region that we kind of occupy.
Yeah.
It's a little further west than we are, so, I mean, there's...
Well, we wake up to ash on our car.
Yes.
And every day you go on social media and you are seeing awful pictures of homes being burned down and people being evacuated and people searching for somewhere to stay, someone to take in the animals that need help, you know. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's over 500,000 people have already been forced out of evacuating at this point alone. And we're not even counting the fires that are going on in Northern California. It's
insane.
It's devastating.
There's the death toll is rising.
Yes.
From the fires.
Yeah. I'm not sure how many it is at this particular moment, but it's
over 20. I read this morning it's at 23, but I'm sure that's changed.
Yeah.
And I think with the shootings, there's just been so many here in the States.
This is the 307th mass shooting in 2018. Alone. Which means we've averaged, I believe, more than one shooting a day, give or take.
Mass shooting,
yeah. We're not going to get into the politics of it because
No.
I'm sure that just adds on to the emotional exhaustion that most of our listeners are already experiencing, but we figured that this would be the most appropriate opportunity for us to handle one of the most difficult topics that we've had on our docket for quite some time now. Death and loss. And of course, loss isn't just death, obviously. It's losing your home, losing a relationship, losing friends. It could be anything.
I have a really good quote from Fred Rogers. And it's, "Moving, divorce, and death are, of course, very different kinds of experience from one another. But whether it's a home, a family structure, or a loved person, the loss is real, and grief can be profound. And it may include a good deal of anger at having had something taken away, as well as sadness that it's gone." And I think that just is, sometimes it's nice to read a bite-sized clip of, right.
Yeah.
That is... especially the anger part, I think.
Yeah. I mean, we're going to do an episode on anger just by itself at some point, but...
So let's talk about the stages of grief.
Yes. So I'm sure, as a lot of our audience may be aware, there is this psychological construct called the stages of grief, and it is built of 5 different parts. There's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. The thing that it's kind of little understood, though, about these stages of grief is that they are not a step-by-step guideline as to your emotional state at any point when you're going through grief.
Yeah, I was misinformed in my youth, and I thought, oh, I'm angry, I'm getting there, and then it was like, I've accepted it. Wow, that was really fast. I guess I kind of missed the depression part. Psych.
Yeah. By the way, guys, that's gonna come back. So yeah, when people are going through this kind of grief and we're finding ourselves more and more kind of drawn to these stages, I almost feel like there needs to be a sixth stage of grief, which is just numb. Like there's
I feel like that might be part of the depression.
It could be part of the depression, but there's no sadness to it. There's just dead, numb feeling. And it ties into our conversation last week about emotional exhaustion, where you're so inundated with so much grief. After a while, it just becomes a numb sensation of, well, same shit.
Yeah.
Same shit, different day.
So I think maybe right now, since this is a heavy episode, we can all take a breath and say something nice to ourselves and think something pleasant. Self-care.
Yeah. Self-care, guys. It is incredibly important, especially going into such a heavy topic as this. So if this episode does feel a little intense for you, you don't have to power through it. We completely understand, obviously.
Yeah. We're not therapists.
No.
We're not professionals in the mental or emotional health industry. But we're just going to have a discussion and hopefully share some insights that might be helpful to you. And
if you yourself are going through this kind of grief, obviously this might be for you.
I think also there's probably a sort of secondhand mourning and grief, especially if you're empathic at all. Just all of us see so much on social media. We've talked about that a lot, but reiterating how that can really harm you emotionally. And you can be traumatized by imagining yourself in somebody else's shoes. That's actually called secondhand trauma. When you mentally imagine. You imagine yourself going through something that is happening to somebody else, and you take on those emotions and you take on that, and so suddenly you have this trauma and you're just laden with it. I used to know somebody who would just have to take days off work because if something happened, like a shooting or something, it would just affect her so strongly. So yeah, taking a moment and thinking about how can you protect yourself emotionally, and then but also giving grief and loss and the emotional pain its due and its time.
Yes. Which brings me to a very important point that before we get to the stages themselves, I think that it's very important to really stress that grief does not have a time limit. It does not have a period in which you are suddenly cured of it. It just has to live its course. That course could be days, could be weeks, could be months, could be years. When you've lost someone so incredibly close to you, that pain can sometimes linger more than you would hope for it to. And that is a point where if you haven't gotten professional help, it might be time. So, going into this, I will start by saying that in terms of death, I have a lot of experience here. I myself lost my father in a motorcycle accident when I was 9 years old. It was sudden, and it was unbelievably devastating. My father was living outside of the state at the time, and he and I were really never too particularly close, but we started to get close. And it was at that point that we got a call at like 2 a.m, and I had thought it was him on the end of the phone. So I brought the phone to my mom, all sleepy and whatnot. And it was when she started screaming that I realized that that was not the case. So everything after that kind of formed my opinions, my thoughts, and my processes from death itself. Within the next few years, I would also lose my grandfather, and I would also lose my great-grandmother, all of whom were very close in my life, and I grew up with them, and it was from that moment on, really, that kind of just solidified that death and grief were not things that were going to lay up. They are there, and they are a part of life as much as the living parts are. And finally coming back from that kind of grief, you do gain an appreciation for life. in a strange roundabout way. You hope and pray that you have as much time with those who are close to you as you would like, but sometimes you're just not given that chance. So what can you do? Well, enjoy the time you've got, for one. We should all really take the time in our lives, as much as we possibly can, to show those that are close to us and those that we care about just how much we care about them, because you may not always have that.
I think adding on to that, because right now seeing people losing their homes and their whole neighborhoods, losing photos and things that you just love. And I know it's just, people can say it's just stuff.
Some of it's irreplaceable.
But it's your home. It's like, it's your nest that you're losing.
It's memories.
Yeah. And so really, I think one of the best things when you're lucky and you're not dealing directly with this grief is just being grateful. Being so grateful for what you have and reaching out to help people who are going through this. It
is difficult sometimes to be grateful, especially in the midst of depression.
Yeah.
We often lose sight so incredibly quickly that while we feel devastated by life itself, when true hardship comes, you find yourself wishing that it was as difficult as it was before. So...
would you say that because you've lost, I think, a lot of people who are very, very, very close to you, do you feel like that is something that you will always live with? Do you have moments? Because this is something a lot of people don't talk about. I lost somebody as well. And the random moments of grief that you aren't expecting.
Yeah, no, those are fun. Because after so many years, like, I mean, it's been, over 20 years since I lost my father, so I still have moments. It doesn't matter, where I'll come back to reality and just go, oh, that's a thing I'll never experience, or that's a thing I never understood, or that's a thing I'll never learn.
Yeah.
Because my father is a completely different person than I am, and I never really got the chance to get to know him. So things like that, or you wish that he was there, that for something. You wish that whoever was gone was just there to see that thing.
So the first stage of grief we talked about is denial.
Yes.
And maybe we shouldn't do it by numbers because, like you said, it can be all over the place. But
it's important that we set, these are the stages as they are listed in various forms of, grief literature.
Yeah.
So we'll stick to that basic structure for now. Just denial is usually your very first reaction anyway.
Just doesn't feel real.
Yeah.
Or it couldn't happen to you, or it couldn't have happened to that person, or
when you're being told horrible news, there's always sometimes, I don't know about always. There's a mistake, or you're fucking with me. This is not a joke. This is horrible.
Yeah.
So you find yourself kind of clinging to that world that is now gone before this horrible event happened. So you'll grab denial and you'll hold on to it real tight, because the alternative is knowing that it's real.
And I think most of us have been in a serious relationship that you love the person very much, and I know I've experienced denial in that. I also just wanted to say that, like we kind of mentioned earlier, there's so many different types of grief. Losing somebody can be a breakup, but it can also be death. It can be, losing a friendship. You can grieve that. You can grieve losing your home. You can grieve losing realizing that you're not going to be a famous artist or something. And that was something that you so wanted for yourself. And you have to kind of mourn the process or mourn those dreams that aren't going to happen. So just because it's not, to some people, like a huge, devastating, I've lost my entire neighborhood, or I've lost my, my best friend to a death or something, your mourning is not less important.
Yeah.
Or real.
You can't quantify loss
No.
in that way, in terms of like how it affects somebody. You can't sit there and go, my loss is greater than your loss, or their loss is greater than mine. It's different.
I see that a lot with when you lose a pet.
Yeah.
Some people just like, well, it was only a dog.
Yeah, I see that too. I see a lot of, well, it was only a dog, or it was only your grandparents, or, you know, it's like, you should...
You can't.
There's so much weird shaming about what people grieve and when they lose things, and it's... Guys, that's bullshit.
Yeah, so if you're grieving something, but you feel ashamed of grieving... So I have been shamed for grieving certain things.
Yeah.
Fuck them.
Yep.
And now we will continue on to anger.
Appropriately enough. The anger is something so incredibly powerful for a number of reasons. When you start off coming off of that denial, or you're coming off the depression or the bargaining, every single one of them can lead right back to anger. Denial to anger, you finally accept it and you're like, this is some bullshit, I don't deserve this, or I don't deserve to feel this way, or whatever happened to those people, they didn't deserve that. It's a sense of injustice that you just feel so gripping over you.
And that's when a blaming happens, I think. That's when you look for someone or something to blame, and oftentimes, you know, it's misplaced.
When it's an accident, you blame whoever else was involved in that accident. When it's a natural disaster, you find yourself kind of at a loss, where it's like, well, who could I blame for this?
Yeah.
I can't blame Mother Nature.
Yeah. You know, I've often blamed myself.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The self-blame is incredibly powerful, where you feel that sort of guilt added on top of it, that either you didn't do enough, or you should have done something else different.
Yeah.
And really, it's so cyclical at that point, where you're just going to get more angry the more that you blame. It's impossible to just go through life being angry and come out happy at the end of it.
I think also our bodies can only really feel intensely one emotion for only so long. You cannot stay furiously angry for weeks.
No.
So that's sometimes it burns out and it moves into bargaining.
Yeah, which bargaining in and of itself is...
It's weird.
Yeah.
Bargaining is weird. I think in my mind... It shows itself in different ways. How has it shown it for you?
For me, bargaining has always been false hope.
Yeah.
It's always that moment where maybe it's not as bad as it seems, or maybe there's something that can come of this, or you want anything to change those circumstances that have been thrust upon you. You're willing to do whatever it takes. It's usually where people will start praying. Yeah. Which... I mean, if you feel personally comforted by prayer, good for you. That's where that is what will help you, and that's good. For me, it was where I started to really go back to being angry, is when I hit that bargaining stage, because no matter how much I prayed, no matter how much I hoped, nothing changed the situation for me, and I would go back to anger. Yeah. And it would just kind of rinse and repeat until I got straight to the depression part. Yeah. Which...
I would say the grief depression is so different than maybe like a low-level day-to-day depression. Grief depression is like an elephant is sitting on you.
Yeah. Grief depression really, like... It's a powerhouse, man.
That's when I can't eat. And if anybody knows me, I love eating. I love snacks. I love to stress eat. Mm-hmm. If I'm just kind of sad, I will eat more. But if I am seriously, painfully depressed, after a really awful breakup, when I lost my uncle who I was very close to, I couldn't eat. Made me sick. Couldn't. I just felt sick to my stomach all the time.
Grief depression, similarly for me, it's a self-destructive depression.
Yeah, me too.
That is where it goes. It doesn't fall into a category of my standard everyday self-destruction. No. This is full force, like I want to be struck by lightning kind of self-destructive. Yeah. There's nothing that can please me more than absolute annihilation. And that's a weird feeling to get into, honestly, when you've gone to that point of I could be struck down right now and I'll be fine. That is just fine by me.
That's a hard place to come out of, and I think what usually pulls me out of the depression is, again, the denial or anger for me. I have a lot of anger when I'm grieving.
Yeah, same.
Maybe just in general. I'm just but it is something. So I've always thought of mourning as waves. You go through sometimes straight through the denial, anger, bargaining is like the wave goes up and then it recedes and you fall back into depression or you fall back into bargaining and then it moves up a little bit further. But every step, every day, you get a little bit further and maybe it's a little bit less until it's here and there during the holidays, and then eventually you do accept it. It's just part of you.
Yeah, you accept that what has happened, and that is life.
Yeah.
It is something that happened to you, and it shaped you, and it changed you in ways that maybe at the time you weren't prepared to face, or you weren't prepared to engage with. Maybe you ran away, you really denied it, or maybe you furiously refused to accept it, or you pleaded for some alternative that you didn't have to accept it, or eventually it would just be something you couldn't even face. But ultimately, what will happen is that grief and that sorrow will become a part of you. And it's not a bad thing.
Yes, and you can get through it.
You can get through it, you can grow from it, you can learn from it.
And I think we've all seen that quote, it floats around, of looking for the helpers, look for the helpers when bad things are happening. And you'll look back at the moments where you were going through these horrible steps and see these people who you didn't expect to come out of the woodwork to help you. And then sometimes for me, which has been hard, is the people who don't help.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother
the people
process.
You might expect.
Yeah, the people that you just assumed of course they would be there for you if you lost your home, or they would be there for you through this horrible breakup, or even your dog passing, and they're just... Now, I would also like to mention, going back to boundaries, that you can't expect people to drop everything for you.
No.
But everybody has the capacity to reach out and help you in some way, or just send you a text like, hey, I'm thinking of you, and I wish I could, drive over right now, but I can't. But I love you, and you will be okay through this. I'm here for you. Cry as much as you can, like send you a sweet gift, just something. But some people can't handle it, and that's their thing. That's not because of you. No. I think people who are prone to depression will then be like, I thought this person loved me, or I thought this person was going to be here for me, and they're not. What's wrong with me? And then so you've added on this, you're going through grief, and you're just normally depressed, and your self-worth is going down, and and that's when
it's this avalanche of just
horrible
emotional bullshit that's just being heaved upon you 1,000 pounds at a time. Never blame yourself for your grief.
Yeah.
That's just, not only is it counter to any sort of healing, it's what is expected of you to a degree.
And it's okay just to sit down and just cry and think of every bad thing and let yourself feel it and give yourself moments and then let it process through and move on through your day for a little bit and then have another moment where you sit and you cry. This whole idea of suck it up, rub some dirt in it.
Stiff upper lip.
Don't think about it. Well, it's not that bad. It just it's not fair. And sometimes you have to be, even though you don't want to be strong in those moments, you have to be strong and stand up for yourself. Like, no, I'm going to go to the bathroom and I'm going to sob for 4 minutes and then I'm going to keep going.
Yep. You can spend that time really just learning from what's going on in your body, in your mind. Mm-hmm. You got to have that time where you fully embrace what is happening and just go, okay, I'm feeling these feelings. Mm-hmm. Let me feel these feelings. And then after that, we'll see what happens.
Yes.
because we're not guaranteed immediate relief. Anybody who promises you immediate relief, come on.
And this is why I stress having people that you have already written down on a piece of paper that is like one of your pillars for if you're going through depression or something. These people, because when you're going through something horrible, it is hard to think of, okay, how am I going to take care of myself now? Who am I going to, like you're kind of in this weird mental state. And having a therapist, I know not all of you, a lot of people say like, we'll just get a therapist, it'll fix everything. No, I mean, it is difficult to find a good therapist, but while you are okay, I mean, even if you're not, but like taking the time to find a therapist that works for you.
Yeah.
What it feels like for me when I go to my therapist is I'm going to hang out with my friend for an hour, someone who is wiser than I am, someone who has much more experience and can help lead me from a position of she has no personal gain if it doesn't, if my breakup doesn't work out or it does work out or whatever, there's no ulterior motive for her except to help me.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of people kind of put their heels in, or well, I'm okay, or I don't need, like, you do, because we're human. And I would like to say back in the tribal days, we had mentors and everybody lived together and everybody would teach each other wisdom and we need more of that.
I mean, a sense of community is incredibly important.
It is important.
And I mean, when the tribe grieves, it grieves.
Yeah.
And it's affected by more than just you. So there's nothing wrong with going to others who are feeling the same grief you are.
Yes.
Absolutely nothing wrong with that. If you can find a support group for some sort of whatever loss you're going through, stick to it.
Yeah.
It really is. It's so incredibly useful and so important.
And if you know someone who's going through right now and you're not going through a grieving process, asking them what they need.
Yeah.
And maybe they can't tell you, but at least I feel like when someone asks me, hey, how are you doing? What do you need? How can I support you? Mm-hmm. Just having that can be everything. I'm seeing so many great people posting, hey, I have an extra room. Hey, I can take a puppy. Like, I have space for a cat. I mean, just posting it out there and just saying there's so many helpers. And so right now, if you're not going through a loss, becoming a helper is the best thing you can do.
Yeah, agreed, 100%. So, on that note,
yes,
what can be done right now to help those who are going through the horrible losses? So we've got ourselves kind of a bunch of links that are in the show notes. Mm-hmm. One, you could support the Los Angeles Fire Department. There's a link for that. United Way is collecting donations and whatnot. The Red Cross is doing blood drives. All of that. LA County and Ventura County animal shelters, they have links where you can donate, or you can also be looking to help foster animals that have been lost, or
but even if you just have a bunch of like clean towel, like old used towels but they're clean, taking them to the shelters. Yes. Sometimes you have the fire departments just need you to bring a bunch of ice or Ziploc bags. I mean, it's not always financial. If you just have stuff, sometimes they need it. Yes,
exactly. I know the LA Fire Department was specifically trying to get water backpacks for the firefighters, which is that's a matter of life or death kind of situation. So yeah, that is definitely something that we're big proponents of. So whatever you guys can do, if there's anything, even if you can't, just spreading the word, that's enough. And getting that out there is so important.
And I'd also like to mention that while we aren't mental health professionals, we are a safe space and we are people who like to be reached out to. So if you just don't want to maybe talk to a friend right now, or you're going through something and you just want to message us, absolutely do. We will get back to you as soon as possible. Mm-hmm. And I can't say that we will give you something that will totally change your life and fix it, but we are here as a support.
Yeah. You can reach us on our Instagram at HAYHU Podcast, where every Monday we do a weekly "How are you holding up?" It's just a simple little question that you answer, and you can send it on back to us, and I will throw a response up there, and it'll be great. You can also like the Facebook page if you want to send us something directly, or go ahead and email mailbag@howareYouHoldingUp.com. Yeah, we we really do love to hear from you guys.
Yeah, it's great. And we appreciate you so much. So thank you if you've stuck it through this whole episode, thank you. And we hope that it's been helpful and maybe even uplifting. So, as always,
don't tell us to just get over it.